The August 12th crop report sent the price of corn and wheat plunging by more than 5%. What was particularly remarkable about this report is that while it showed there was extensive damage to crops in certain areas, particularly in southwestern Minnesota, going into South Dakota, as well as in a band of Illinois just south of Chicago, and in northwestern Ohio, for the most part, the Midwest came through the flooding better than expected, with crop yields fairly stable in most areas and actually acreage planted improving quite a lot in areas of Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. So overall, it looks like the harvest is not going to be the disaster that some feared it would be a few months ago. But what's particularly interesting about the behavior of corn and wheat prices in 2019 is how much it resembles previous years. In fact, every year since 2014, we've seen a tremendous rally in corn prices and a tremendous rally in wheat prices in every year except for 2016, in the months of May, June, and early July, only to see those trends reverse later on in the summer. So what's behind this propensity to rally into late spring and early summer, only to fall back as summer wears on? Well, part of it is indeed fears of crop damage driving up prices during the planting and early growing seasons. This seems to be a persistent development now for each of the past 5 years. But that seems to be counterbalanced with an incredibly resilient crop that seems to always manage to come back towards the end of the summer. But there's more to it than the mere resilience of crops and a tendency to rally into spring and then come back in the late fall. It also has to do with the greater diversity of global growing regions. The U.S. is no longer the dominant exporter of corn. That's now the Black Sea region, with South America very rapidly catching up. Similar story for wheat. We tend to see wheat prices now more and more dominated by what's happening in the Black Sea, which exports roughly twice as much wheat as the United States does. As such, it's not surprising to see the global marginal cost of production being set in places like Brazil, Argentina, Russia, and the Ukraine. Hence, we're starting to see corn prices following the Brazilian real fairly closely. Certainly, sometimes weather events in the Midwest can create spikes in the price of corn, but they tend to come back to where the real suggests they should be in the long term. Likewise, we tend to see the same thing with the Russian ruble and wheat. Sometimes weather conditions in the Midwestern United States can cause temporary rallies in the price of wheat, but longer term it seems to settle close to the global marginal cost of production, which increasingly is being set in Russia. So when we look ahead to crop prices, a lot of it may depend on what happens in Brazil and Russia. Their currencies found some support earlier this year as a result of pension reforms. However, both countries are now on the verge of a recession. And in addition to that, both of them are extraordinarily dependent on commodity exports, which in turn relates very closely to what's happening in China. China's response to the latest escalation in the Sino-US trade war has been to allow their currency to depreciate. This has the potential to pull energy and metals prices lower, as well as the real and the ruble, and potentially put downward pressure on corn and wheat prices as well. I'm Eric Norland, Senior Economist with the CME Group in London.